few people know what it's like to be in this storm of partisan persecution. Few people. KT McFarland is one of those, and actually I've been reading some of the past Mueller is coming things as it relates to Michael Flynn, KT McFarland, and many others. And she was one of the people who was dragged through the mud with this. And she has a great new book out. She's a bestseller. The book is Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. It is for sale everywhere where books are sold and online, of course. And KT, who's the former national deputy, well, here, I'm going to mess everything up because I'm trying to get into everything all at once. KT McFarland, it's a pleasure to have you. And I tell you, this, there's so much that is in with this. You were the deputy national security advisor under Flynn at this time, going through this whole storm. They were setting you up from the get-go. You knew this. Other people that were in this very small circle knew this. And the rest of the country was drugged through 3 years of partisan bickering, witch hunting, persecution. Lives were ruined. Tens of thousands of dollars spent to defend against this. And now we have American voters looking at this terrified, thinking this was done to someone like you who worked in the White House. This was done to a hero like Michael Flynn, who had said, I signed up to serve to fight the Russians. And here, ironically, he's being targeted as part of a conspiracy theory from people who wanted to undermine the election. I have got to get your reaction to Judge Sullivan's decision and to basically invite the public into this, to dispute dismissing this case. And I really want to get your perspective from what it's like inside the eye of the storm.
Yeah, I think it's just criminal. Poor General Flynn and his family. And they have been dragged through, as you say, years of this and humiliated and scorned and bankrupted, by the way. Millions of dollars in legal fees, none of which will ever get reimbursed to him. And at the end of the day, what was all this about? I mean, he was targeted. He was targeted from the get-go. And as President Trump said just today, it wasn't really about General Flynn or me or others. It was always about President Trump. It was always, how do we get to President Trump? How can we hobble the Trump administration? And who wanted to do the hobbling? It wasn't just the Democrats. It was the deep state. It was the people who didn't like the fact that Trump had promised to drain the swamp. These were the swamp creatures. And so they knew exactly how to do this. They knew that they could use the intelligence community and their allies and the Washington press corps and the liberal media and have a drip, drip, drip of stories about General Flynn, classified information coming out, and always with their spin. So the objective was to always get rid of the Trump administration and Trump personally, and the avenue to do it was going to be General Flynn, because they thought they could get him. They knew he had a son that he loved very much, and that they used that son and the threat of going after his son to blackmail General Flynn. I mean, he sacrificed himself, Dana, so that his son wouldn't get charged.
He did.
And what did the FBI guys want? They wanted to catch people in perjury traps. They wanted me to say things about General Flynn that he didn't do, and to say things about President Trump that he didn't do. And at the end, thank goodness, I'm very proud of myself in the end, but I did not succumb to the pressure. I did not plead guilty to crimes I didn't commit. They did not charge me with perjury, but they did General Flynn, and his life has been destroyed by it. The fact that he's now got to go through even more of it just seems so wholly unfair.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like this from a judge. And I was reading an excellent piece from Jonathan Turley on this, who has practiced in front of Judge Sullivan. He knows of his demeanor, and he was frankly quite shocked by this decision. This is partisanship on full display. And I think after this point, I don't have any faith in these departments anymore. I don't have any faith in really almost law and order at this point. And I think that a lot of other Americans feel the same way. And now with this unmasking, how much have we lost, KT, with our civil liberties because of this? Because with the unmasking, the only people that were ever to be able to access this information had to demonstrate a serious role in national security and legitimate concern supported by evidence for why they needed to know who these people were. And it apparently every Tom, Dick, and Harry with the Democrat Party was able to walk in and access it, including Joe Biden. There's no protection for civil liberties.
I think you raised a really important point that most people have just glossed over. They're looking and saying, well, the Joe Biden requested unmasking Obama, blah, blah, blah. It's the lower level people that I'm really concerned with. Why? Because they have no reason to have requested that. This is a concerted attempt by an outgoing administration. And they were just, I think, at the end of the day, if you ask some of those people whose names are on those forms, are you the one that requested that unmasking? They'll say, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I think that they were putting people's names on those forms because they didn't want to have them all come from the West Wing of the White House. But what they were trying to do was they really wanted to spy on General Flynn, and they knew they couldn't do it legally. So they had this workaround that they couldn't wiretap Flynn, but they could wiretap foreigners who were talking to Flynn. And so that's what they were doing. They figured if they looked hard enough, they could find some dirt. Well, they didn't find any dirt, but that didn't stop them.
No, it hasn't stopped them. And I always talk about this, one of the ways that laws are strengthened is by the consistency that they're applied. And in this instance, as it relates to trying to set up this perjury trap with Michael Flynn, I keep going back to, here you have Peter Strzok, who also spoke with Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills about classified information and top secret information, sensitive information on private servers. And they outright lied, as we had discovered, to the FBI. But yet there was discretion applied, partisan discretion, in which they were not charged for clear evasions of truth. Whereas with Flynn, as I understand it, they were trying to go at him because of differences in recollection for doing something, by the way, that was completely legitimate to do in his transition period.
Let me tell you what happened to me, because it's very similar to what happened to General Flynn. The FBI shows up at my door. They're at the bottom of my driveway, and so they call and say, "Can we come in?" And I'm a stupid idiot.
And you were ambushed. I want everyone to realize this. You had no idea this was coming.
No, they showed up at my door. Knock, knock, knock. Hi, we're the FBI. And so I let them in, and I said, well, what are you here for? And I said, well, we're here from the Mueller investigation. We want to, we're looking into Russian interference with the election. And so I said, well, I want to find out what the Russians did as much as anybody, more than anybody, because I want to make sure they don't get in the middle of our elections again. I want to find out. I want to prevent it from happening. So I cooperate. And so then I say, Dana, I said, well, am I under some kind of an investigation? Do I need a lawyer? Because they didn't say anything at first. And I said, well, look, we can't tell you not to get a lawyer, but we're really just here to get some background information. We want to just find out who was who and who worked for whom. And so I then spent hours upon hours upon hours with these FBI agents. And every session they would come back and they would show me emails or text messages. Some I received, some I wrote, but it was never in chronological order. And it was never the complete email chain. It would be like a paragraph out of an email where the rest was redacted. Or there would be one email, but the chain of the 15 emails before and after it had been eliminated. And when I asked them, well, can I, how about letting me make copies, since I have no access to these documents? And they said, that's not how this works. Because again, good Girl Scout, I turned in all my government records and files and text messages when I left government. So they had all the records. I had nothing. And then they sat there and said, well, on Tuesday, you had this phone call. And I couldn't remember if it was Tuesday morning or Tuesday night. And then they would come back. We should have remembered that. And the implication was that I was lying. It even got to the point, Dana, where they looked at about a 60-minute gap on my phone records and text messages and emails. And they said, you were really active before this, and you weren't active after that. Was that 60 minutes when you met with President Trump? Did you get your marching orders from President Trump on how to deal with the Russians? And I look at this and think, 60 minutes. No, I didn't meet with Trump. I said, oh my gosh, that's when my husband and I took a walk along the beach. I left my cell phone at home. I mean, that's what they were trying to find, any little trick. And they did the same with General Flynn. The difference was they then went back to him and said, basically, we'll make you a trade. You plead guilty to a crime, which I'm sure they knew he didn't commit. And then they wouldn't charge his son. And so that's where the whole genesis of this is with General Flynn. I mean, that's how our FBI is acting.
Which is terrifying.
They can do it to me.
Anybody.
They can do it to anybody.
Anybody. I want to ask you about your book, but first, really quickly, how does this end? Because here we have evidence that Flynn is an innocent man. We know he's an innocent man. We know that this has been a partisan witch hunt, but yet still they pursue. When does it end, or does it ever end?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak to General Flynn's current status and the ins and outs of the legal part. But let me put on a different hat. President Trump has assured me several times in person and on the phone that he's going to get to the bottom of this, that he's not going to be scared away from it. He's going to find out who did it. He calls them the dirty cops, and he's going to hold them accountable. And I think any other president would have not had the courage to do this. But President Trump, he's just tough as nails, and I think he will follow it through. I know that there is a lot more that's to come. The unmasking part is just the tip of the iceberg, because I'm convinced, and there will be documentation that will come out either with the Durham report or it will be released, legally released, not leaked to the press. And it will come out showing that they knew that the entire Russia investigation was a hoax, that the heads of the CIA and the FBI and the Defense Intelligence Agency and all those, they were going to Capitol Hill, and in classified briefings, they said, well, there's no evidence of Russian collusion. And then they were going on television that night, and they were saying, oh, President Trump, he's compromised by the Russians. He's a Russian agent. And so that's why they fed the flames and fanned the flames in the media. And so we ended up with 3 years at each other's throats over something that was made up. My question is, why did they do it? Yeah. What were they trying to cover up? And who knew it? How high up did it go? What did President Obama know? And when did he know it? And Susan Rice and Joe Biden and everybody, what did they know? And when did they know it?
Yeah, that's exactly. And it's not if they knew, it's what they knew. What did you know? This is already going to go down in the history books as being one of the greatest scandals, I think, in American history, and the severity of which is still being determined by the information that's coming out. Okay, your book, Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. I love the title of it. And this touches on something that I love. All of the criticism that I have seen so much against the administration and against people who voted for Trump and people who, advocated for, whether it was the economic policies of the administration or what have you. Have you noticed that there is this very classist, almost snotty view by, the East Coast media, the West Coast media? They view these dirty proletariats who went out there and supported, a guy who is not a politician, and there is just such a snotty view to that. And I think it really shows this giant chasm between the people who distribute our news and the people who actually make the news and read and consume the news. Tell me about this, because your book gets into some of this.
Okay, so I was one of those people. I mean, I'm a card-carrying member of the Republican foreign policy elite and establishment, but I broke with them. I mean, I went to Oxford, I went to MIT, I worked for Henry. I mean, I had it all. Member of the Council on Foreign Relations, but I broke with all of them in 2016 to support Donald Trump, because I thought that 20 years of American foreign policy had been going in way the wrong direction. We were so focused on the Middle East and on terrorism, which were important, but we took our eye off the main event, which was China. And I write about it at great length in my book. Trump was the only person talking about China. They made fun of him for talking about China. He was the only one, Republican or Democrat, who understood. And that's why I supported him. And I think China, we've been putting China first for so long. And finally, we have a president who's putting America first and standing up to China. And now look where we are. I mean, it was prophetic what Donald Trump did, because look at what the Chinese have now done to the world. Right. I mean, we gave them so much, and we just were so good to them. But the time has come now. We're going to have to face up to it, get our allies along with us, and stand up to China, because they have every intention of making the 21st century the Chinese century. And look at how they plan to rule it. Oh, completely. And the warnings were there. And and the other politicians, the other people clamoring for elected office, they did not focus on it. And so now you're right. It does seem almost prophetic here. Well, the book is Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. It's available now wherever books are sold. KT McFarland, a pleasure. I've known of you. I've read your stuff forever. It's a pleasure to speak with you. And we're going to continue following this case, and we're so thankful for your fight. Thank you. And thank you for what you do, too. I'm very proud of you.